Okay, let's unpack this. Iran is yet again in this violent cycle of protests. And you see this pattern where they might start over, you know, economic despair, the currency collapsing, cost of living just spiking.
Hmm.
But they always seem to escalate. They become these outright anti-regime calls against the Ayatollahs.
And the state response is always brutally predictable. We get reports of hundreds dead, thousands in prison, and this huge informational blackout trying to hide what's really happening.
Exactly. And when a country hits that kind of crisis, the past stops being just history. It becomes a political weapon.
Right.
And the question is no longer academic. It's being asked on the streets in the diaspora everywhere. Before the Islamic Revolution, back in the time of the Shah, was life actually better?
And that's our mission today, isn't it?
It is. We are diving into a stack of sources that detail the Pahlavi dynasty's attempts at modernization and, well, its deep authoritarian seminal streak.
What's fascinating here is that tension. The tension between social liberalization on one hand and total political closure on the other. We're going to trace this lineage because it's not a simple choice between, nostalgia for the past and radical change. It's about deep institutional failures that paved the way for the clergy.
So to really get this, we have to go back to the beginning of the Pahlavi era. Early 20th century Iran was, well, it was incredibly vulnerable.
A very fragile state.
Fragile, decentralized, pressured by the British and the Russians, and internally it was just fractured. You had elites, clergy, tribes, merchants, and a really decadent monarchy, the Qajars.
And that kind of instability, it just creates an opening for a strongman. And that's where Reza Khan comes in. He was a military officer.
Right, in the Persian Cossack Brigade.
Exactly. And he emerges in the 1920s because he understands that in a crisis, the most important tool isn't tradition. It's a loyal, centralized army. He built his power on that.
Which allowed him to make his move. In 1925, he just deposes the last Qajar monarch, Ahmad Shah.
Ending a dynasty that had been around since 1789.
And he installs himself as Reza Shah Pahlavi. This is the start of this incredibly ambitious, almost breathtaking project to turn Iran into a modern, centralized state.
Breathtaking is the word for it. It's similar to Ataturk in Turkey. He's pushing for industry, building huge infrastructure projects like the Trans-Iranian Railway, a public education system.
And he's trying to sideline the clergy, right? Imposing Western dress codes.
Oh, absolutely. He was fast,
Right.
he was decisive, and he was ruthless. But that vulnerability to foreign powers, it didn't just disappear.
No. Which brings us to 1941, World War II. Iran declares neutrality, but the Shah was seen as, let's say, leaning towards the Axis powers.
And the Allies, the UK and the USSR, they just couldn't tolerate that. They needed Iranian oil, they needed the territory for supply lines, so they invaded.
And that invasion leads directly to Reza Shah's abdication. He's forced out, exiled, and his young son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, takes the throne.
Right, and he aligns the country with the Allies. But
Yeah.
then we get to the event that really shapes the next 30 years.
The seismic event, 1953. The new Shah is up against his own prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh.
A democratically elected prime minister and a national hero for nationalizing the oil industry, which had been controlled by British and American companies.
That put him in direct conflict with the West.
And our sources pull no punches here. This was a U.S. and UK-funded coup. Mossadegh was overthrown. The Shah, who had actually fled the country for a bit, is brought back to power.
And that moment is just so crucial for so many Iranians. The overthrow of a popular leader by foreign powers became this symbol of wounded honor.
Yeah, it cemented the idea that the Pahlavi dynasty was, at its core, a foreign project.
So Mohammad Reza Pahlavi comes back to power, but he has this massive legitimacy problem. I mean, how do you govern a country after you've basically been installed by foreign powers?
It's a huge problem. And his solution was what you could call a compensation strategy.
Okay, what do you mean?
He essentially doubled down on his father's project. Aggressive, rapid, Western-style modernization, but he combined it with a complete tightening of political control.
So the deal was, you may not get democracy, but you will get modernity.
That was the deal. And it leads to the famous White Revolution in the 1960s. These were sweeping reforms.
Land reform, literacy programs.
Huge literacy programs. But the land reform was critical. It stripped the Shiite clergy of their vast land holdings. That immediately made them enemies of the state.
And the social changes. I mean, those are dramatic, especially for women.
Real, tangible gains. Women got the right to vote, more freedom, and new family protection laws that challenged the old patriarchal structures.
The sources described Tehran in the 60s and 70s as, almost indistinguishable from a Western city. London, Paris.
Women in miniskirts, modern architecture, Western movies. It was this modern, secular, urban middle class that was really plugged into the global economy.
Which brings us to the core contradiction. With all that modernization, was there any democracy, any real political freedom?
If you define democracy as, real competition for power, a free press, legal opposition,
Hmm.
then the answer is a definitive no.
It was a constitutional monarchy on paper.
De jure, yes. But de facto in practice, it became a total autocracy.
And there was a specific moment this became official, right?
1975, that was the breaking point. The Shah dissolved the already controlled two-party system and just created a single party, the Rostakis party.
The message being...
There's only one path, and it's my path.
And to enforce that lockdown, he relied on a pretty chilling tool of repression. Let's talk about SOVAK.
SOVAK, the secret state police, the Organization for Intelligence and National Security. And it was controlled directly by the Shah. Its name just became synonymous with terror.
What made it so feared?
Its reach. It was everywhere.
Yeah.
Universities, the government, the army, even among Iranian students abroad. Their goal wasn't just to arrest dissidents. It was to eliminate any form of opposition.
And the methods were brutal.
Systematic. We're talking severe torture, forced disappearances, show trials, just the knowledge that SOVAK could be anywhere, that any criticism could lead to prison and torture. It created this climate of total psychological fear. That was the price of modernization.
Which leads us to this incredible irony, this self-sabotage. The Shah creates this educated, modern, globally aware society.
But he denies that exact same society any political voice. He crushes all the legitimate outlets for pressure.
So he creates what one analysis called a gigantic enemy.
Precisely. You dismantle all the political parties, you muzzle the press, you imprison the opposition. When you do that, you create a vacuum.
Why was it the clergy that filled that vacuum? I mean, he crushed other groups too, right? Secular groups, leftists.
Oh, absolutely. He was very effective at neutralizing Western-style opposition,
Yeah.
like the National Front or the Communist Tudor Party. They were usually small, urban, intellectual groups, easy targets for SOVAK.
But the clergy were different.
They were a unique challenge. Their power wasn't in one office in Tehran. It was decentralized in thousands of mosques and religious schools in every village. They had deep roots with the merchant class, the bazaar.
The pre-existing network.
A vast network that SOVAK could never fully police. And so it became the default shelter for all opposition. The clergy, led by Khomeini from exile, they didn't have to create a new opposition. They just occupied the only space left.
So the Ayatollahs came to power, in large part, thanks to the Shah.
In a very real way, yes. By
Hmm.
crushing all other forms of opposition, he inadvertently positioned the radical clergy as the only viable, authentic alternative.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize this. Let's create that balance sheet. Based on the sources, what was actually better under the Shah and what was worse?
The pros, if you will, were mostly social and economic. He had a more secular state, a much more open urban life.
Especially for women in the middle class, as we said.
Right. Greater integration with the West, real gains in infrastructure, education, and, of course, military power. The Shah's Iran was the regional policeman, buying F-14s.
But that came at a huge cost. The cons list is heavy.
Very. Zero effective democracy, systematic repression via SOVAK torture, political prisoners, and the regime was seen as deeply corrupt, with the Pahlavi family enriching itself.
Now, let's hold that up against the current regime. The sources are pretty clear that while the Shah was brutal, the Ayatollah's repression is fundamentally worse.
It's a different kind of state. Iran became a brutal theocracy. Religion isn't just an ideology, it is the law. The repression under the Shah was political. Under the Ayatollahs, it's total. It governs every aspect of life.
And the mechanism is different, too.
It's more pervasive. The security apparatus between the Revolutionary Guard and the Baathi militia is arguably even more brutal. You have public persecution and an extensive use of the death penalty that makes Iran one of the top executioners in the world.
And for individual liberties, especially for women, it's been a complete rollback.
The sources describe it as being pushed back to almost medieval standards. You have the morality police enforcing strict dress codes. The state is actively policing every citizen's public moral choices in a way the Shah never did.
So the takeaway is complex. Life in the cities under the Shah appeared more normal, more secular, but that was a veneer over a brutal political reality.
Exactly. But the current repression is just. Greater in scope, severity, and justification. It uses religious law to crush all dissent.
And this history is so vital when you look at the future. If the current regime falls, who or what comes next?
It's the key question. And one name that always comes up is Reza Pahlavi, the Shah's eldest son.
He's positioned himself as a coordinator for a transition to a secular democracy, decided by a referendum, not as an automatic king.
And he does have some advantages. Name recognition, for one. It gives him a channel to Western elites, and his public outreach to Israel could signal a huge shift in the region.
But that name, Pahlavi, isn't that also a huge liability? It's tied to Savak, to the coup, to autocracy.
That is the heavy burden of the surname. Yes, there's nostalgia for the social freedoms, but there are also very real, painful memories of repression. For the generation that lived through '79, and even for younger people who know the history, the idea of restoring a monarchy is a non-starter.
So he's not a magic solution. The problem is institutional.
Absolutely. A successful transition needs more than just a face. It needs a new institutional architecture. A framework that can prevent both the return of a brutal theocracy and the return of that modernizing authoritarian monarchy. It needs real resilience.
So we've traced this central failure. The Shah's regime offered social and economic progress but crushed political rights, which, ironically, guaranteed the clergy's victory by eliminating everyone else.
And we've established that while the Shah's repression was chilling, the current brutality is far more extreme, using the power of a theocracy to control everything.
With Iranians in the streets again, our deep dive leaves us with a final, provocative thought. The choice isn't just between nostalgia for the Shah or radical change. The real question our sources push us toward is this. After almost 50 years of fear, chaos, and brutal theocracy, what kind of durable, resilient state can finally be born in Iran that respects both the social needs and the political rights of its people?